The soft glow of the evening sun bathed the small Louisiana town in gold as Senator John Neely Kennedy stepped out of his car, his signature humor and charm ready for a quiet dinner at one of his favorite local restaurants. But the moment he walked through the door, something shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks froze halfway to mouths, and all eyes turned toward him. The hostess, barely out of college, looked nervous. Her voice trembled as she said, "I'm sorry, sir. We can't serve you tonight." For a man who had faced political storms and national scrutiny, her words landed like a thunderbolt. A silence thicker than molasses filled the room. Kennedy's smile faltered, and he could sense not anger, but deep embarrassment from the young woman. He took a slow breath, unsure what would happen next. He stood there for a moment, the door gently closing behind him, his mind racing. This wasn't Washington, D.C., filled with political drama and hidden agendas. This was home, the place where he'd grown up, known by name and handshake. "May I ask why?" he said calmly, though his voice carried an edge of disbelief. The manager emerged, wringing his hands, eyes darting between the senator and the guests. "Sir, we've had complaints," he murmured. "Some people don't feel comfortable with you here tonight." The words hit harder than he expected. Not for the insult, but for what it revealed about the world outside politics. For once, this wasn't about votes or headlines. It was about humanity. Kennedy could feel the sting of rejection in a way that was painfully personal, not political. And everyone watched, waiting for him to explode. But he didn't. Instead, Kennedy gave a small, almost sad smile and nodded. "All right," he said softly. "I understand." He turned toward the door, the air heavy with unspoken judgment and guilt. Outside, the evening breeze carried the faint sound of laughter from nearby diners who had no idea what had just happened. He sat in his car for a long while, staring at the dashboard, thinking about the meaning of civility, of kindness, of the invisible lines people drew between one another. He wasn't angry, he was disappointed, not just in them, but in how easy it had become for people to forget decency. For a man who had spent his life defending freedom, it was a bitter irony to be refused the simplest one, the freedom to be treated like any other person. After a few minutes, Kennedy did something no one expected. Instead of driving away, he went to a small diner down the road, the kind with flickering neon lights and cracked booths where locals gathered after church. When he stepped inside, there were no cameras, no polished menus, no fine wine. Just the smell of fried catfish and strong coffee. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, recognized him instantly, but didn't make a fuss. "Evening, Senator," she said with a smile. "Table for one?" He nodded, grateful for the normalcy. As he sat down and looked around, he noticed families laughing, kids sharing milkshakes, and old men playing cards by the window. It was the real Louisiana, unfiltered and genuine. It reminded him why he had gone into public service in the first place, to protect this simple, beautiful spirit of everyday people. Word of what had happened at the fancy restaurant spread faster than wildfire. Within hours, social media buzzed with outrage, speculation, and defense. Some people criticized the restaurant's decision as disrespectful and un-American, while others debated whether it was justified. Kennedy, meanwhile, stayed silent. He didn't release a statement or call for a boycott. Instead, he kept going to that little diner every evening for a week, chatting with customers, helping bus tables when it got busy, and even buying meals for strangers who couldn't afford one. He wasn't there for a photo op. He was there because he believed that dignity was earned through grace, not anger. Each night, the diner filled a little more, not because of who he was, but because of what he represented. The restaurant that had turned him away soon found itself at the center of national attention. Reporters crowded outside asking for explanations, demanding apologies. The manager finally spoke, his face pale and voice shaking. "We made a mistake," he said simply. "We let fear and pressure make us forget our values." It wasn't a press release crafted by lawyers. It was a confession of humanity. Kennedy saw the clip on the news but didn't gloat or celebrate. He simply smiled and said to a friend sitting beside him at the diner, "Everyone stumbles. The question is whether we help each other back up." That humility struck a chord far beyond Louisiana. Letters poured in from across the country, farmers, teachers, students, each thanking him not for fighting back, but for forgiving. A few days later, something unexpected happened. The young hostess from that night showed up at the diner, nervously clutching a letter. Kennedy recognized her immediately. She looked different now, no longer afraid, just remorseful. "Senator," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize. I didn't want to refuse you. I was just following orders." Her eyes glistened with tears. Kennedy stood, his kind eyes softening. "I know, sweetheart," he said gently. "We all have to make hard choices. What matters is what we learn from them." He invited her to sit down, and over a cup of coffee they talked, not about politics or blame, but about courage, fear, and kindness. By the end of their conversation, she smiled again, relieved and lighter. Soon after, Kennedy returned to the restaurant, not with cameras or reporters, but quietly, on his own. The manager was shocked to see him. "Senator, he began, but Kennedy raised a hand and smiled. "I'm not here for an apology," he said. "I'm here for dinner." The room fell silent as he sat down. Slowly, customers began to smile, and a few even stood to clap. It wasn't about politics anymore, it was about redemption. That night, he shared stories with the staff, tipped generously, and even took a photo with the same hostess who had once turned him away. It was the kind of ending no one could have scripted better, the kind that reminded people of the power of humility and forgiveness. In the days that followed, the story spread across the nation, turning into more than just a headline. It became a symbol of how one act of grace could heal a wound that outrage only deepened. Talk shows discussed it, churches preached about it, and classrooms debated its message. Kennedy's calm, dignified response inspired countless others to handle conflict differently, to listen before reacting, to forgive before condemning. He didn't lecture anyone. He simply lived his values out loud. In a time when the world seemed divided by anger, he reminded everyone that kindness was still stronger than pride. Months later, when asked in an interview why he chose forgiveness over confrontation, Kennedy chuckled in his familiar drawl. "Well," he said, "if you fight fire with fire, you just get a bigger fire. But if you meet it with water, maybe, just maybe, you save a few hearts from burning." His words became an instant classic, shared and quoted everywhere. It wasn't just a story about a senator anymore. It was a story about what it means to be human. To stand tall when disrespected, to stay kind when misunderstood, and to forgive when it's hardest. By the end of that year, the little diner that had welcomed him became a symbol of unity and compassion, attracting visitors from far and wide. Kennedy never claimed to be a hero, but to those who watched his quiet act of forgiveness, he had proven something rare and powerful, that real strength lies not in retaliation, but in restraint. The restaurant that once refused him now thrived under a new motto, engraved above the door: "Everyone is welcome." And every time Kennedy passed by, he'd smile, knowing that sometimes the greatest way to change the world isn't through power, but through grace.